expository writing. And this is us building on what we would have started in our previous session, where we looked at the communication process, right? And we looked at the factors that enhance and hinder oral and written communication. We looked at receptive skills, which involves listening and reading. We looked at expressive skills, which involves speaking and writing. And we reviewed our figures of speech. And I hope you've taken the time to go over those. Now, what we're going to be focusing on is a particular form of communication, and that includes writing. So we're essentially going to be going over the basics of the expository writing process. So now, what is expository writing essentially? So what expository writing allows you to do, it allows you to write in such a way where you can explain a concept, you can classify it, you can compare, you can contrast, you can describe, and it is really geared towards allowing you to explain, inform, to clarify, to define, or instruct via a logical analysis, which pretty much just means that you're giving a process analysis, meaning that you're allowing the reader to get a step-by-step look at what a process entails. But we'll look at those in details later on. All right, so expository writing usually demonstrates characteristics of focus on the main topic, logical supporting facts, strong organization, clarity, unity, and smooth transition. Expository writing has three main parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. And this you would have become familiar with, when you were doing CXC English, when you were doing communication studies. You would have gone through the process of putting together an essay, right? And with expository writing, it is important that this right here, where you see introduction, body, and conclusion, it is important that you pay attention to this structure. It is the very, very, very core of essay writing, is knowing how your essay is supposed to be structured. So when we're looking at expository writing, this is the structure that we expect, right? And the idea of this structure is to allow you, as we said on the previous slide, it allows you to explain to thoroughly and in a organized and structured way. It allows you to explain, which will allow you to clarify, which will allow you to inform, which will allow you to describe. Because at the end of the day, if your idea is not properly structured, you are going to create a barrier between yourself and the receiver of that message. Remember, we looked at the communication process. So if it is that you're writing in a way where I can't follow because it is not smooth, it is not clear, it doesn't transition in a way that allows me to follow, you're going to create a barrier in the communication process. So when we're thinking about expository writing, all right, how do I go about writing an expository essay and ensuring that when I do so, it is done well? First of all, you're going to think about what you're going to do, right? You have to think first, what do we want to do? And the prompt that I'm referring to is, am I trying to clarify? Is it my aim to describe? Is it my aim to inform? So when we say read the prompt, as on the previous slide, you would have seen where I indicated that prompts for expository writing use words such as explain, clarify, inform, describe. So if it is that you are expected to do any of these things, using the expository writing techniques would be the ideal method. So you're going to decide what it is that you are trying to do. After you have done that, you're going to brainstorm your ideas. All right, what do I want to say? And again, we discuss this when we're looking at the communication process, when we're encoding. What do I want to say? All right, I'm trying to inform. Okay, what details must the reader know to get the message that I am trying to convey? What do I have to put in? All right. When you've done that, then you make your outline. And we're going to do that in this session. After you've brainstormed your ideas, you're going to make an outline. So you're going to say, all right, this expository writing essay must have an introduction, it must have a body, it must have a conclusion. Okay, cool. What am I going to put in my introduction? All right, am I going to define the terms? Am I going to use a quotation? What will I do to position myself or to position my essay in such a way that it will get the reader interested in what I'm saying, and it will put them on a path to following a structured process of receiving the information. In other words, when you make your outline, you're thinking to yourself, what am I going to put in each section, and each section being the introduction, the body, and the conclusion? What am I going to put in each section to properly inform, to properly describe, all right? And then after doing so, you're going to start writing your introductory paragraph, right? So you're going to define whatever concepts you need to define. You're going to let me know what your perspective is, what your stance is. You're going to outline the points that you're going to discuss later on in the essay, that is in the body of the essay. And then you're going to write at least 2 or 3 body paragraphs, right? So in your introduction, you're going to define your terms, let me know what is needed, and then you're going to start putting your ideas together. When you get to the body, right? When you get to the body is where you start to outline your points and give supporting details to each of the points that you would have outlined in your introduction, right? And then we can begin writing or concluding paragraph after we've done that, all right? But we'll go through in detail a little later. All right, so when you're writing an expository essay, you need to know about the subject you're going to be discussing, describing, clarifying, informing the reader about. You need to know what you are going to be discussing. And that makes sense, right? Because that will influence the amount of facts that you are able to include. And if it is that you want to share points, if it is that you want to inform, you don't want to create a situation where at the end of reading something that you wrote, the person is more confused than they were before they started. You don't want it to be a case where you have misled your reader, and you don't want it to be a case where your perspective is not considered productive, it is not considered worthwhile, it is not considered substantial because you have not taken enough time to get to know about this thing so you can speak, or in this case, you can write from a place of confidence because you know what you're talking about, right? Then after you have done that, it is expected that you're going to arrange your facts, right? Or if it is a process analysis, or so you're going to arrange the facts, or you're going to create your steps or outline the steps in clear progression so that the reader will follow each stage. And this is why the thesis statement is important. So that from the beginning of your essay, I know where we are going, right? Once I get into your essay, that your introductory paragraph is supposed to say, all right, this is what I believe, or better yet, this is what this thing is. I'm going to define this term, and these are the points that I'm going to use to support the points or this definition or this concept that I'm trying to bring across to you, right? And that's what your thesis statement does. So we know where we are going, right? So you as the writer, you know where you're taking me, and as I read, I can follow you, right? And when we're talking about clear progression, we're talking about developing your essay in such a way that I can see that there is a build-up, right? So you're not going to mention one point in paragraph 1 and then you barely make reference to it in paragraph 2, and then you bring it up in paragraph 3 and you make reference to something that was said in paragraph 2. No, it must be a clear progression, right? And we're going to look at that in detail. And of course, you're expected to use clear, sound language, right? Try to stay away from the use of slangs. Try to stay away from terms that will sway the reader, conjure up emotions that may affect how your message is received. And as you can remember, this is also the link to last session. Remember, we're talking about euphemisms, and we're talking about the fact that euphemisms are essentially politically correct language because you're trying not to offend. You are just trying to deliver a message in a way that it is easily understood, right? So when we say use clear, sound language, use words that are readily known. Use words that the reader can grasp, not only the meaning of the word, but the idea of the passage as a whole. Right? And so we're going to take a pause right here. And so here are some single phrase topics in exposition. What I want you to do now is you're going to take a moment to choose a topic. After you have chosen the topic, what I want you to do is to create an outline. Tell me, based on the topic you have chosen, how you would structure this essay. First thing I want you to tell me. In the introduction, what details do you think you would need to share? What points in your thesis statement would help you to bring about an understanding or a greater appreciation of the topic that you have chosen? How would you go about doing that? Right? And then you're going to just give me a word and a sentence in the body. So based on the 3 points that you would have outlined in your thesis statement, each paragraph must begin with one of those points. Right? So you say, all right, you're going to look at smoking, for example. You can say, all right, you're going to look at the long-term effects of smoking, and you can cite a source that will outline the negative implications of smoking, and these are the points that you're going to cover. You're going to look at the impact on skin. You're going to look at the impact of smoking on the lungs. You're going to look at the impact of smoking on the environment. Those are your 3 points. It would therefore mean that in the body of your essay, point 1 would be effects of smoking on the skin. Give me a sentence related to that, right? Effects of smoking on the lungs, that will be the second paragraph, or the next point paragraph. Give me a sentence related to that. Then the last one will be the effect of smoking on the environment, right? And then you give me a sentence related to that, and you can then think of what you would use to conclude, to tie these points together in a way that you can feel comfortable knowing that your point was delivered, right? So then we have the different types of expository essays, right? And we have the cause and effect essay, we have the comparison and contrast essay, we have the classification and division essay, we have the process analysis essay, and we have the problem and solution essay. And the names of the essay, the name of the essay essentially tells you what you're going to be doing, right? And it is important to know what kind of expository essay you're going to use, because then again, there is a structure that you need to follow. So you know that, all right, I want to inform. To properly inform my reader of a particular matter, I believe using cause and effect would be the most effective method, right? So you're going to use cause and effect exposition because you want to show the effects of an event or to explain the causes of an event, right? So you're trying to essentially explain why things happen, right? And we must also understand that there are several possible relationships between cause and effect. You can have one cause and you can have one effect. So for example, eating stale foods can cause stomach ache. You can have many causes and one effect, right? An effect can attribute to many other causes. For example, one's poor health may be attributed to malnutrition, overwork, or lack of sleep. You can have one cause that has many effects. One cause may be attributed to many effects. For example, a man loses his job. As a result, he lost his house, car, and family. All right? So an example of a cause and effect prompt is explain the causes and effects of a poor diet. So the prompt meaning based on what is expected of you, this is the type of essay you're supposed to write. So when you're choosing to do a cause and effect essay, you're going to figure out, or better yet, you're going to decide, is it one cause and one effect? So this thing causes this thing, and that is what I want to discuss. Or is it a case where many causes have had this effect, right? So malnutrition and overwork and lack of sleep have resulted in one effect, which is the poor health. Is it going to be a case where you're going to look at one cause that has many effects, right? So, for example, this one thing happened, which is the man loses his job, and as a result, all these other things have happened. So all of these other causes are attributed to, all of these other effects, I should say, can be attributed to the loss of a job. So these effects are associated with this cause, with this one cause, right? And before it was these causes are associated with this one effect, right? Which is the case in number 2. All right, so let's take a look at a cause and effect essay. All right, so we're looking at this, and let's just go through it together. So this is a cause and effect essay, and again, in our introduction, we're seeing an overview or an introduction of this issue is given to us. So the homeless epidemic is a serious problem in nearly every major city across the country. According to the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, there are over 500,000 people experiencing homelessness on any given night. It's a difficult challenge to tackle precisely because it is so multifaceted, both in terms of its causes and its far-reaching effects. Homelessness affects not only the people who must struggle to survive on the street, but also the business owners or residents in the neighborhoods. Petty crime and drug abuse are common. While many factors have contributed to the rise in homeless rates, one of the most profound is the lack of adequate social support services. And what I want you to tell me here is, what kind of cause and effect essay is this? Based on these thesis statements that would have given us an idea of where the essay is going, right? Because here it says there are many factors that contribute to homeless rates, but the most profound is the lack of adequate social support services. So is it one cause, one effect, or is it multiple effects, one cause? Right? Let me know which one best supports this or best describes this kind of cause and effect essay. All right, so then we're going to look at the causes now. By definition, a homeless person is one without a permanent home. They may seek shelter in parking garages, ATM vestibules, and subway stations. On a purely practical level, if a city can provide enough homeless shelters and other forms of affordable housing, the people who would otherwise sleep on the streets can sleep far more safely with a consistent roof over their heads. And it goes on to outline other causes, all right? And then the effects. The effects of homelessness are equally complex and can be mirror images of the root causes. Because the person is experiencing homelessness, this may put profound strain on personal relationships. Drug abuse can become an issue as the person seeks some way of coping with the pain and hardship of living on the streets. This leads to a downward spiral that drives the person deeper and deeper into the depths of crippling poverty and isolation. And again, we have also given another effect, and we're going to look at this point by point versus block by block technique when we're writing. Conclusion. Every city, every neighborhood faces unique challenges when it comes to homelessness. While the specific root causes can vary between individuals, the lack of adequate social services is a leading contributor. All right, so we have our introduction. This is the problem. Let me tell you about this problem. All right. Then let me tell you where I'm going to go. Well, many factors have contributed to this, so that's a thesis statement. So this is the problem, but this is what I am going to discuss. All right, and here are my causes, outlined one after the other in a block. And here are my effects, also outlined one after the other in a block. If we were using a point-by-point method when we're outlining the causes and effects, the person could have given a cause here, and then they could have put an effect here. They could have had a cause here, and they could have had an effect here. But because they have narrowed it down, right, the effects that is, or better, it's the cause of homelessness, because they have narrowed it down to a focus on inadequate social support services, this is why they can give you all the causes and all the effects in blocks. Instead of point by point, like giving me 1 point and saying, all right, this is the effects, giving me another point saying, okay, these are the causes, this is the effect. Because it was narrowed down to one, it can go block by block, meaning that I have given all the causes, right? One after the other, one block of information is causes only, and below that I can give you all the effects, right? So this is a writing strategy as well. All right, let me move back. All right. So that is cause and effects, and I'm going to send you this PowerPoint. So now we have comparison and contrast. So a comparison and contrast essay shows the similarities and differences between two things, people, ideas, or events. Compare and contrast expository writing has two subjects, and the presentation of compared similarities and contrasted differences. Comparison and contrast essays can focus on the strengths and weaknesses of something and the advantage and disadvantages of something. There are two ways to develop the comparison and contrast essay. That is the point-by-point method or the blocked method. When applying the point-by-point method, the writer discusses one characteristic of both subjects at a time and then moves on to a second characteristic about both subjects and then a third characteristic. Usually, there must be at least two characteristics discussed so as to make the comparison and contrast convincing. All right, so when we're talking about comparison and contrast, we're showing the similarities, we're showing the differences, right? We can show the advantages, we can show the disadvantages. So we're showing the good and the bad, the pros and the cons in any given situation. So when we're saying to make your compare contrast essay substantial or convincing, it cannot be a case where you have all advantages and one disadvantage, or multiple disadvantage and one advantage. You have to try and keep it balanced. You have to try and substantiate your points in such a way that it can be convincing. So when we're using the point-by-point method, where we have two subjects. So say, for example, we're looking at city life versus country life. We can say, all right, in the city, it is more expensive. You have more temptation. In the country, it is less expensive. It has less temptation, and temptation meaning clubs and attractions that may not be present in the rural area. All of those are present in the urbanized areas or in the city. So point by point, in the city, this is what happens. In the country, that is what happens, right? And we're just looking at expenses. And you also have, when we're talking about more temptations in terms of where to spend. You have so many places to go. You have so many places you can eat. You have all of these forms of entertainment or of things that you can indulge in. So from food to clothes to partying to the attractions that may be present, there's so many opportunities to spend your money. There's so many temptations. Oh, I can buy this here. Oh, they have this here. All of these things will force or influence an individual to spend more than they would as opposed to if they were living in the country. So the point-by-point method is we're going to look at city versus country life. And we're going to look at the points. So we're looking at living expenses. And then we're going to talk about in the city. We're going to talk about in the country, right? That's point by point. Then we're going to look at facilities. And we're going to look at facilities in the city, facilities in the country. Then we're going to look at living environment. We're going to look at living environment in the city, living environment in the country, right? That is point by point. So for every factor, you're going to give the comparison and the contrast related to that particular factor. In the blocked method, on the other hand, the writer discusses a set of characteristics about one subject and then moves on to discuss the same set of characteristics about the second subject. it is important that the discussion of the characteristics of the two subjects should be in the same order. So again, we're looking at country versus city life. We're looking at living expenses. We're looking at facilities. And you can see living expenses in the city. And you're going to give me all of the factors: living expenses, facilities, living environments. All of these things are going to come under city, as opposed to previously where we had a breakdown of each of the factors. Let me go here. So with a point by point, we had living expenses and we looked at it in both places. We had facilities and we looked at it in both places. Whereby in the blocked method, we're looking at the city and we're going to look at all the factors that are present in, or examples of what it is like in the city. And then after we've looked at that, we're also looking at it in the country. So the same living environments, the same expenses, the same facilities are discussed in a block. So on the city, we have all the living expenses, we have all the facilities, we're looking at living environments, and that is all related to the country. And then when we get to the country, we do the same thing: facilities, living environment, all of that. And then after we've done that, we can create the comparison, or better yet, we can create the contrast. So you can either go point by point, all right, this is what facilities, or this is what it is like in the city as it relates to entertainment. This is what it is like living in the city as it relates to environment. This is what it's like living in the city as it relates to facilities, right? And that is you going point by point. You can also use the blocked method, as I said, or you can say in the city, facilities, living environment, and what was the next thing? Expenses. This is what it looks like. And in the country, this is what it looks like. And so you can create another form of comparison that way. And I'm going to send this article to you. Well, let's just go through the methods first. Then we have classification. So the classification essay is one of the most common ways to organize an essay in academic writing. I'm going to share that sample essay with you a little later. So essentially in a classification essay, we organize things into categories and give examples of things that fit into each category. For example, if you choose to write about types of computers, PCs, and servers, each of your developmental paragraphs will define the characteristics of a different computer type. So you're going to tell me about personal computers, and you're going to tell me about servers, right? It is recommended that at least 3 separate groups be presented and discussed in a classification essay. For example, if you are to write an article introducing the charms of the city where you live, you may develop your writing in terms of the natural environment, the public facilities, and the people in your city. These 3 groups relating to the main topic are normally found in the thesis statement. So when you're writing your introduction, this is where you're going to tell me what you are going to be including in the body, which is where your developmental paragraphs are found, right? It is one very important element of the classification essay, if not the most important one, is the principle of organization. Writers should always ensure that the 3 groups relating to the main topic do not overlap, right? We're going to look at this when we go through the outlines a little. All right, so when we're talking about classification essays, when we're talking about this overlap, just to be clear, you don't want to start telling me about PCs, and then you're going to talk about servers. And in your discussion of servers, you're telling me about PCs, right? That would not be a properly structured classification essay, because the idea or the essence of a classification essay is that you're going to categorize to bring across the point. So in defining or describing the characteristics of one thing versus the other thing, your point can come through. It cannot be a case where you're telling me about city life versus country life, and while you're talking about country life, you're including a discussion or you're making mention of city life in your discussion of country life. It wouldn't be a properly structured, it wouldn't be a proper classification, right? It wouldn't be a proper classification because they're interlapping, they're overlapping, right? And that can create confusion. And then we have the problem and solution essay. So the problem and solution expository essay is structured in such a way that the problem or issue is identified as well as plausible solutions to resolve or mitigate the problem. The primary focus of this type of discourse is solution resolution of the problem. For example, cyberbullying. An essay like this would have in the introduction an overview of the problem, and then you would give 3 solutions as the thesis statements. Then in the body, this is where you would organize the solutions using the least effective solution to the most effective solution. In other words, the writer will give information, which would be the solution, in sequence, the least effective to most effective. And then with all conclusions, you summarize the main points in the body of the essay. So essentially, when you're writing your conclusion, you are going to restate the points that you have made, and then you give a final word on the essay. So you can say point A, which said this, point B, which said this, point C, which said this, all support the idea, are all influenced by this, or they all highlight the idea that. So with your conclusion, you're essentially saying everything that I have said essentially means this particular thing, right? And then we have our process analysis essay. This type of rhetoric mode can be considered to be the easiest to write of all rhetoric exposition. This essay provides information relating to the process or steps of how something must be executed. It provides guidelines to the reader, for example, how to bake a cake or how to be a successful person. The structure of this essay consists of an introduction with thesis statements. And in this case, your thesis statements aren't just points, your thesis statements are steps, right? So whenever you're thinking of process analysis, think of any cookbook where they'll give you all of the ingredients and they'll tell you, all right, first you get your blender, you put your flour in, you put the egg in, you put the sugar in, you put your butter in, then, and that will be the next step. Then you mix it until it is smooth. If it is that you're going to add fruit, this is where you would add your fruit. So you add your fruit to that process. It can also say, before placing or before pouring this mixture into a baking pan, ensure that you have lathered the baking pan with butter, or you have used that thing called again, or you have used like a cake sheet that you put into the pan to prevent sticking. Right, so after you've done this, you can pour in the mixture, you place it in the oven, you put it at 250 degrees, and you leave it there for 20 to 40 minutes or whatever the case is. Right, so you essentially give the steps. These are the steps that you use to accomplish this particular class. All right, so that is essentially a look at what expository writing is. So you understand what structure is available. You understand, all right, the prompts, and remember when we talked about prompts, based on what is required of you, you have to decide which type of expository of the expository writing essay would best allow me to accomplish the task of informing, of analyzing, of clarifying. This is where you decide, this is where you encode essentially where and what is going to be involved in that process. All right, so that's the basics of expository writing. Now we are going to focus next on our outline, how we create our outlines. All right, so just take the time to review this section, listen to it again, watch it again, just to familiarize yourself with what expository writing is, how you can ensure that you are writing a good expository essay. These are the tips that you consider: brainstorming, outlining, writing your introductory paragraph, having your body with 2 or 3 developing paragraphs, and then ending with your conclusion. And as you will see with all examples of exposition or the expository writing essay, you can see that in all of these strategies, it details the importance of having multiple points, and by multiple meaning more than 2 points, because it adds greater substance to your writing when you have at least 2 to 3 points. All right, and this you can do if you know your subject. And remember, I need you to go over this. I want you to choose a topic and I want you to create an outline, because that is what is going to take us into our next activity.